everybody, and welcome to our first Jam session. We're going to be doing episodes just like this, maybe once or twice a week to bring everybody into the world of Jam. And for our first session, I've got our founder and CEO, Badri, with me. And we thought what we'd do is kind of just give an introduction to Jam for our first Jam session. So welcome, Badri. We're looking forward to learning a little bit more, and maybe you can start by telling us what is Jam and who you are.
Super excited to be doing the Jam session with you, Asim. Thanks for taking the time. So Jam essentially is sort of a video-first collaboration experience for modern teams, right? One of the things we're trying to build with Jam is essentially, and I often say this to a lot of folks, collaborating with your team should be as easy as if you're sitting around a desk and jamming on an idea. And I don't think you should be limited by your time zone or location. And I think I'm super passionate about the idea that the brightest and the best people should be able to seamlessly collaborate wherever they happen to be and whenever they want to, right? So essentially, Jam is sort of a very lightweight application that lets teams sort of communicate in this very fluid and seamless and engaging way, just so teams can collaborate and be super creative, right? And we believe that, we want to play a small part in enabling that ecosystem of products that form the connectivity tissue of the modern workplace. So that's sort of the essence of Jam, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it's super interesting. As you're kind of talking about what Jam is, I think a few things pop out to me. One is this aspect of collaboration, which is super important. But obviously, it gets harder as teams are more and more virtual, more and more distributed.
Right.
And it seems like that's a lot of what we're trying to tackle with Jam in a variety of ways, whether you're fully remote or working from home a few days a week,
Right.
or even in different buildings on the same campus.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where the need came from. How did you discover that this was a need?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and like a lot of products out there, I think Jam is mostly motivated by a personal need all of us face on a day-to-day basis, right? Adam, Juan, and I, my co-founders Adam and Juan, we all worked in a remote and distributed team that was spread across 10 cities, 7 time zones across 3 continents, right? And like a lot of people, I'm sure that sort of resonates with people in sort of similar teams, we were drowning in sort of textual information, and we were just waiting from meeting to meeting, just trying to coordinate and work with others. And like most others, we try to solve that problem with process, right? With process and existing tools. And what we quickly found out was it just doesn't cut it, right? I think the workplace and how we think about work is sort of radically changing. Whether it's the rise of remote work or whether it's sort of increasingly remote and distributed teams, whether it's this entire like digital nomad movement, right? Like, where people are living in Tahiti and spending half their time coding, half the time surfing. How we think about work, what work looks like, is sort of changing dramatically, right? And one of the things we found out that the modern workplace is more like a beehive rather than a pyramid. And I don't think you can build an amazing team just with process, right? You need to be super intentional about culture, about communication, and just collaboration in general.
Interesting, super interesting. Yeah, this idea of a beehive versus a pyramid. Elaborate a little bit more on that. What does that mean? And tell us a little bit about where the problem areas were that you saw.
Yeah, and I think it's this entire concept that business cycles are getting like way faster, right? If you remember from back in the day, we used to do waterfall deployments, and then it became agile, and then now it's like continuous delivery. And if you actually think about it, everything is getting faster and faster in the workplace. And to some degree, what that requires is sort of light touch communication across teams, massive sort of coordination that is not burdensome, but still happens at a very high frequency. And I think communication is such a fundamentally sort of primal emotion, which plays a very important part in that puzzle, right? I was recently reading a study that said 93% of communications is sort of nonverbal, right? Like just let that number sink in, 93%. And that essentially means text and words constitute only 7% of communication, right? Yet we are all drowning in text in the workplace, right? Whether it's Slack or GitHub comments or Trello or Google Docs. it's just an overload of information. And I think it's way easier and way more concise just to be able to talk to somebody than go back and forth in some common thread, right? And I think one of the problems and one of the deep beliefs we have is that great teams are, I think, characterized by this missionary zeal. And I think that zeal comes from a culture of trust and phenomenal alignment, right? And I think face-to-face communication plays such a crucial part in sort of enabling that reality. And we think that's one of those elements that's missing in the workplace today, right? You've got to choose between very impersonal, lightweight, text-based communication or sort of very formal, heavyweight conferencing, right? There's nothing in the middle. I think what we need is something that sort of strikes the right balance between those two modalities.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, as I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm kind of hearing two different aspects to this approach. On one hand, you have this kind of idea of culture, and how do you really create a close culture that's built on trust if you are just using text,
Right.
and people don't get to talk to each other, they don't get to be live with each other. And then on the other hand, I'm also hearing this component of better and deeper understanding when you move away from text and you go to more things like video and audio. So tell me a little bit about where does video fit into all of this, and maybe you can elaborate on why it's important and why we haven't seen more tools that are kind of video first in the enterprise.
Yeah, and I think it's just it's a matter of time, because if you actually look at social and consumer apps, you see this explosion of video in social and consumer apps, right? Whether it's Snapchat or whether it's live streaming on Twitch, video as a modality as communication, which is sort of engaging, that is concise, that's sort of spreads the point across quickly. And when I say video, I obviously mean both audio and video. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see this come into the workplace, especially because of the modern realities of the workplace, right? Like, let me give you a couple of examples. A guy I used to work with in my previous startup used to live in an orange orchard in Bakersfield in California, right? And he would literally wake up in the morning and he would code and he would just work remotely from the orchard. He just loved it. And that sort of cuts both ways, right? On the one hand, you get to focus and you're sort of in your zone. On the other hand, it's increasingly lonely when you're remote and sort of cut off, right? And I think video and face-to-face communication sort of brings those micro interactions, right? That playful banter, that water cooler conversation you would have if you happen to bump into somebody in a hallway. And I think it's super critical to be able to recreate that sort of environment, right? I think the second thing is this concept of what I call it's about information and not context, right? We're all drowning in text. We have all of the information. What we often miss in the workplace is context around how decisions get made, right? And so I think it's far easier to talk through stuff and get that context and the color and the tone and the thinking behind decision making, rather than sort of wading back and forth in some thread in between gifs of exploding kittens, right? And finally, I think there's this concept of meetings and video conferencing as sort of some universal cure-all, right? I think that's like taking a sledgehammer to a surgery. It's really hard to do stand-ups if everybody's not in the same time zone, right? It's way easier to come out of a sales call and talk to someone rather than write up some lengthy report about how to deal. It's way easier to sort of show a bug than send repro steps, right? I could keep going on and on. I think the traditional modes of video, which is conferencing for the most part, just doesn't cut it. We've all been in those meetings where people are sitting for 45 minutes, fiddling on their phones or playing like Candy Crush, just waiting for your 2-minute update, right? And I think like meetings are great, but there's a whole bunch of problems around scheduling, about the formality of meetings, about the availability of people. And I think, and yeah, there are tools that helps you solve those problems, but I think there are far better ways to collaborate in very creative, lightweight ways if we unshackle ourselves from this assumption that video conferencing and a tsunami of text is the only way to get stuff done, right? I think there are far better ways to solve this problem, and I think technology can frankly enable that.
Amazing. Well, this sounds all super great, Badri, but tell us, what do people do? How do people get access? Where are we in terms of the stage that Jamm is at?
Yeah, we are now in an invite only sort of access stage, but you can quickly come to jamm.app, that's jamm.app, and you can sign up to use the app. And obviously, if somebody says they've watched this video, we're going to give them an invite immediately. But it's super easy to get up and running, and I'd love to have people try it out and sign up for early access if they want to.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this first Jamm session, Badri, and for telling us a little bit about Jamm and the history and what we're trying to do with it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.